Hey guys, welcome into the House of Halas podcast. Immediate reaction to the Bears' stunning loss, in my opinion, to the
Gut
Minnesota
wrenching.
Vikings. 8 straight losses for the Bears. They fall to 4-9 on the season. I'm Jack. That's Frank. Now decided that he wanted to go to bed and just try and sleep off what we just all watched because Frankie, I'm not. Normally, we throw out the stats. Oh, Caleb did the XYZ and blah blah blah. Nah, not even worth it at this point in the season. It's just an ugly game from start to finish. Never truly felt like the Bears were really ever in this game. Uh, Frank, what are some takeaways that you had from this game?
I have two takeaways, and we don't have to go deep, like in me answering the question. I want some of yours, and then maybe we can delve in and see what we want to parse through. One, I think I'm out on Ryan Poles, dude, and I can expound on that a little bit later, but that's my sort of grand statement right now. I'm like 95% certain I want him gone. Two, Troy Aikman was terrible. Troy Aikman was really, really bad to a point where, Jack, I feel like me and you have talked about this in private. I don't know if we ever talked about this on the podcast, but it's an idea that I've had for some years now. I'm so ready for the NFL to have like MLB style broadcasting where you get your team's guys for these games.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not even that Aikman was just, bad. He was. He didn't, this could have been a one-off. But he's saying things that just shows you that you're not watching the games. The point that he tried to make about Doug Kramer going in at fullback, and he's like, oh, you can't just plop him in there midweek and expect him to know how. He's played fullback this whole fucking year. There's been packages almost every game with him at fullback on these 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, or 4th and goal or whatever. Like, he's been in there. One of the season-ruining plays was fucking handing him the ball off. Like, you don't have these little things. Yep. Your analytics team isn't dropping you little things. Hey, when Doug Kramer goes in the fullback, make a mention of something that happened early. Like, it's horrible. It's not just him. It's the total product right now of the NFL, of NFL commentating that I'm upset with. Jackie, I feel like polls we'll dive into. What were some of your takeaways?
Yeah, I kind of want to stick on Troy Aikman a little bit because I just the hyper analysis on Caleb Williams, like his entire career was just off the rails at this point. It was kind of crazy to see. He said that sacks are a quarterback stat on the one where Kieran Amagaji just completely whiffed and Caleb gets set. Like, Troy Aikman, I don't know if he just hates the Bears. I kind of feel like we have this problem with him consistently, and I don't want to always be like, oh my God, this commentator hates my team or anything like that. But like, he gave more leeway to Ryan Poles and Kieran Amagaji than he did to Caleb Williams. It was just very strange to see. Like, he talked about Caleb like he hadn't done anything well. And I think the problem that Caleb is facing or has kind of faced throughout the season is like media personalities really holding him to these just crazy expectations and not really going into not giving context to why some of these things are happening. And I think that's kind of where I was most disappointed in Troy Aikman tonight is he just didn't offer any context. It was very much just broad general statements about why he thinks Caleb isn't playing well, what Caleb could be doing better with, again, out adding context, giving guys a little bit more room to operate, like Kieran Amagaji. Well, it's his first start. What can you really expect from him? Ryan Poles, he built this roster. I think they're pretty, it's a good roster. They're just not being coached very well. Oh, but Caleb, he doesn't get rid of the football. He holds on to plays too. It was a weird kind of flip for him. And I just didn't really understand why he was going so hard on Caleb. It's just this overall media narrative I feel like that's been pushed where it's you look at the stats and yeah, he might not be statistically having the best rookie season compared to Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, whatever, but it's also the narrative that's been built around Caleb. There's not a lot of push nationally, to your point, that is helping Caleb. It was very strange from that perspective.
I agree. I would love to go back. I don't, because I don't want to say something that feels like overreactionary, but I felt this way almost the whole year. I just don't recall a number one player being picked that has been treated this way and like talked about this way. Everyone, like to your point, everyone else, even some of the rookies that are playing very well, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, when they make a bad play, when they have a bad game, it's the rookie ups and downs, rookie ebbs and flows. He's not afforded any sort of luxury of being a rookie. And I knew we were going to get that from the Fields cult, the people who just were waiting for any excuse to continue to hate on Caleb Williams because they wanted to keep Justin Fields. But to see that happen from the national media side has been so weird. Like, this is something I feel like the NBA does. Like, and that's why they're not marketing people very well. Like, I've never seen this from the NFL before, to my knowledge. I'm even thinking of, like, who was the defensive end that the Jaguars picked, who's been
Trayvon Walker,
who's been horrible in comparison to Aiden Hutchinson, who went right after him. And like, you don't hear anything about, granted, I know defensive end isn't nearly the glamour position that the quarterback position is, but even like he'll make a play finally and it's like, oh, look at him. He may not be living up to the number one standards. Look at Bryce Young. The dude stinks. And he's going to be treating him like a fucking Make-A-Wish kid. And it's like, this was Caleb who's putting up these numbers and doing the things that Bryce has been doing. He's been playing better, but that's not saying much because he played so bad his rookie year. Caleb is not that. Caleb has been making some rookie mistakes that maybe some people thought he'd be above in his first year for whatever reason. But the whole narrative and the whole, I don't want to say handling, but just like talking, it's everything. It's the announcers, it's the the FS1 shows, the ESPN shows. I don't know. It feels like all fronts right now, and it's one of the stranger dynamics. Jackie,
well, and it was real quick. It was I think what like a play that perfectly summed up kind of what we're talking about here outside of the court, sacks are a quarterback stat thing, was when Caleb threw a touchdown pass to Rome Odunze. And Keenan Allen just sort of stuck his hands out and sort of broke it up, played a little corner there. And both Joe Buck and Troy Aikman were like, we don't know where he was throwing that football. Where was he going with that football? And you watch the replay, and it's very clearly like Caleb was going to Rome, and it would have been a touchdown. But Keenan decided to try and get his hands on it because maybe he didn't know that there was anyone behind him. And it's like, they're laughing, and it's that type of context that's needed. And nationally, when you hear, because you and I are Bears fans, we're obviously going to be pulling for Caleb more than the average fan would, whether they're just watching Monday Night Football because they want to, or they're Vikings fans, or whoever's tuning in. And you hear two of those guys laughing like that, like, of course you're going to be like, oh yeah, Caleb made a bad throw. When it's like, no, actually he made a good throw. It's just this wide receiver decided to try and make a catch that wasn't for him. Like, it was just weird. It's just lazy. It felt very lazy. And to your point about it being, hoping for maybe more of like a Major League Baseball or even NBA where you have your own hometown broadcast that you could tune into, like, it does feel like there are a lot of games to watch, Frank. There's 32 NFL teams. It's a lot to watch every single second of every single game. I'm not gonna expect any broadcaster to do that. Maybe when you're making whatever it is, like $18 million that he's making at ESPN, maybe you put in a little more work to know that Doug Kramer had played fullback before and had one of the biggest plays that ruined the Bears season. But who am I to judge? That being said, though, I think that's why I'm in total agreement. I would love that local coverage. You've watched every single game. You've watched every single snap. You have that context, especially late in the season like this when it's a 4-10 team and or 4-9, whatever they are, and you're just like, who cares at this point? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So I'm fully on board with you. I would absolutely love that.
Agreed. No, in the branching off of the Keenan Rome in the same area thing, like, first of all, even if Rome wasn't there, if Keenan just catches that ball, he probably scores. Like, he's breaking back in towards the pylon, and he just drops it for the umpteenth time this season. I swear to God, I don't know this to be true, Jack, but I do think he has more drops this year than he's had in his whole Chargers career combined. I'm almost positive that stat is real. But one of my prevailing thoughts as well, and I think this leads really well into a Ryan Poles conversation really quick before we get out of here. I need these guys to make some plays, man. I'm not excusing Caleb on the throws that, he has to make where he's not just letting it rip. Whether that's a long-term worry or not, to me, I can just chalk it up as a rookie mistake. I think you're playing Brian Flores for the second time on the year. You diced him up the first time. He's got some film on you now, and I think he was confusing him. Again, not excusing it. There were still throws that had to be made. He missed, I believe it was Rome on a deep route where you got a breadbasket. I'm not excusing the things he's doing wrong. But the times where he puts it in your vicinity, make a fucking play. There's no way that I should be tuning in the Packers games and seeing Jaden Reed and Wicks and fucking whoever else, Christian Watson when he's healthy, once every 7 games, making some absurd throw to help Jordan Love out. But we have name brand, those are great value names. And I'm not saying they're bad players. I'm just saying the general or the casual fan probably does not know too many Packers receivers. They're just not name brand names. We have Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, and now Rome Odunze, a top 10 pick. And these guys just look for every opportunity to not make a fucking play. And it's something we said. I guess the reason why I'm so passionate about it, it's not just because it's Caleb. Even when we were out on Mitch and we were out on Justin, this has been a prevailing theme for every one of our young quarterbacks. These guys just don't make plays. And then we're left with like the fucking corpse of Jimmy Graham as the only guy making plays for Mitch that last year. But it's like I want a team that everything doesn't have to be perfect. One missed throw, and all of a sudden the whole offense is done. One drop, the whole offense just sputters that whole drive. The drive is over. You texted it quite a few times. This team is full of pussies, and that's what they have been. They just have no fight in them, which again leads me to the Ryan Poles conversation. I'm watching a 3rd-round left tackle who, I'm not expecting everyone to be Braxton Jones. I'm not saying he's elite, but like he was a 5th-round guy who started from day 1. That's unique. That's tough to do. I'm not expecting Amagaji to be that, but to be that inept at your job as a 3rd-round pick, man. Like I get if you get steamrolled every now and then or whatever. He looks like an undrafted player. Like he should be on a practice squad somewhere. His footwork is horrible. He has no idea who he's supposed to be blocking. He doesn't look like he knows the rules of football. I know we got into football a little bit later. I forgot his whole backstory. I know football hasn't
He's
been...
He's an Ivy Leaguer. No excuse.
Yeah, fuck, yeah. I mean, maybe he's book smart. He certainly isn't football smart, but I don't know, man. The more that I'm watching this team... Let me break it down the way my brain is working right now, Jack, and then I'll toss it to you, because I feel like I'm rambling. This team, no one was expecting Thomas Brown to totally turn this thing around. We joked of like, he's going to win out and like we'll make the play. No one was ever serious about it. If you were, please seek therapy. Seek it anyway. It's good to have. But when I'm looking at a coaching staff that's stripped down to the bare bones, again, I don't know how much we'll ever talk about Thomas Brown anymore. It's not his fault. This is a tough situation to be in. But right now, you're just relying on the talent that's on the field. You can't coach guys up being the interim guy who was just the passing coordinator 2 nights ago. You know what I mean? It just is what it is.
Yeah.
And when you watch the talent on the field, who stands out on this team? Caleb is still making splash plays, and we know what he is. I'm not worried about Caleb yet. We see the talent that's there. But on every single level, we're seeing Tremaine Edmonds be non-existent on these 3rd and longs in the middle of the field. It's just wide open. His angles to tackles are horrible. The defensive line got better in the second half, but even then, I thought that was one thing they called correctly. It was like, it's not really one guy. It's like by committee, and they sort of get hot. Yeah, that portion's true. Secondary doesn't seem to be phenomenal. Maybe they miss Brisker a little bit more. I mean, the point that I'm making is, Jack, if you strip this thing from coaching like it has been, and you're relying on talent, the talent is not there. Ryan Poles has not made the strides I think that even we have fell victim to giving him credit for. No one on this team, like obviously outside of your rookies and such, but like if they traded DJ Moore next year to get more draft cap, they say they get a 1st and a 3rd. Are you sad about that?
Not even a little bit.
That's
made
what
that
I mean.
point
Like
very clear last
because Jack, and I'm sorry, I know I asked you a question that cut you off, but the other thing is, it's not even like, I get why people were emotionally attached to Justin Fields. He made really bad teams fun to watch because of how fucking the one crazy play he would make per game, or like 3 of them. We don't even have, outside of Caleb, of course, we don't have that. Like, who are you attached to? If Cole Kmet just gets fucking UDA'd next year, who fucking cares? Like, this team doesn't even have a personality. It has nothing.
Yeah.
They're terrible.
Yeah. And I think that's the most surprising thing is, when Ryan Poles was hired, he made it I thought very clear that this team would have some type of personality. He was obviously we've heard the cliche a number of times now, but he was a former offensive lineman. We thought that's exactly how he was going to build this team. It was going to be tough. It was going to be violent, as Thomas Brown has said. And it just didn't happen. He chose the wrong head coach, and obviously the reverberations that have gone through this locker room have just completely imploded this team. This team was soft mentally, and because Frank, let's be very clear, one of the luckiest plays in the NFL history completely shattered this team. And that's
Yeah.
just inexcusable. Like the fact that they couldn't recover from that because their head coach couldn't be bothered to take the accountability necessary it's just sad because this team was 4-2 on their way to 5-2. Did they have their problems? Of course they did. But they were on the rise, right? After London, things were clearly pointing up. To think where this team has come now is just insane. They've now will finish. I assume. Well, I don't even have to assume they're going to finish with a worse record than they did last year.
Oh yeah.
Which
Yep.
to me is just completely inexcusable. Thomas Brown's message has not gotten through at all. That new head coach, the interim head coach bump, did not happen. Again, this team starts slow in the first half and then shows some signs of life in the second half. Not that it matters because they still lost. They almost get into the end zone, make it a one-score game, but nope. The backup fullback guy that's awful just didn't report, and that took a touchdown off the board. They couldn't score. They had to kick a field goal. Like that's what bad teams do. And for the first 6 weeks of the season, Frank, this was not a bad football team. Now they had their problems. We all saw that Titans game. The offense had a slow start. Whatever. We went through that. But after that London game, like we were all on a high.
Yeah.
Because things were just looking so good, and just to think where they're at now after what the GM put together, Troy Aikman, I gave him a lot of shit, and he could have stopped after saying, in the preseason we gave them a lot of credit for how good this roster looked, and it was a good roster then. Stop there, but then he continued to say, I don't blame Ryan Poles for a lot of the things that have happened is just insane to me because this is all on Ryan Poles. He made the decision to hire Eberflus. He made the decision to retain Eberflus. He made the decision to hire Shane Waldron in lockstep with Matt Eberflus. They had a defensive coordinator terminated for personal reasons. They had a running back coach fired due to personal reasons. Like, this is not clean. This is not a clean football team. They've made a lot of weird personnel decisions. They've made very questionable trades. They've just it really sucks, Frank, because when the first draft pick of the Ryan Poles era happened and it was a defensive back, I think you and I both kind of internally were just kind of like, uh-oh.
Oh, if we can find that text thread, we were heated.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, granted, both of those players that the first two picks that he'd had ended up being, I would say, pretty good to very good players. Like Kyler Gordon is probably their most talented player on defense. But guess what, Frank? It's a nickel corner.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Like it's because I feel like me, you, and Nas in our text thread, we're like, oh man, we fucking love him. But it's like, yeah, okay, that's great, but he's a nickel. Like that's not gonna, was he gonna blitz once or twice a game? Maybe gets a pressure off of that, couple pass deflection. That's not changing the game for you, man. Ryan Poles has completely neglected both trenches, and a game like this just shows that. It's this weird narrative that Caleb is just holding the ball too long. First of all, I want my quarterback to be able to hold the ball a little bit longer. Routes need to develop. Everything can't be 2 seconds and under. Like, it's just watch fucking Josh Allen. Watch Lamar Jackson. Watch for as ugly as it's been this year. Watch Patrick Mahomes. These guys, they continue to in or out of the pocket create time. That's what you have to do in this league for routes to develop. These corners are too good. They're not just getting blown past like the fucking 90s anymore. Like it's the corners are getting paid now. They're not skill position, but I forget what you call it on the defensive side. I'm getting sleepy, but they're a position to build around now. The secondary is so it's I don't even know why we're watching games anymore, Jack.
Yeah. or we're watching to see any more development from Caleb, but it's hard when your GM ignored the three most important positions in football until this past season. He left tackle, defensive edge, and quarterback. Now he's obviously I think he's got the quarterback, but Frank, I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little frustrated with Caleb. And I know we're expecting a lot from him. We've expected a lot from him all season, fair or not. But this team, we expected with a quarterback upgrade over Justin that this team would be a playoff team. Now, granted, coaching has had a lot to do with that. But I'm not seeing a lot of the major steps from Caleb that I was hoping to see at this point in the season, especially when you think back to those early games, week 1, week 2, where he was missing those deep throws, and we were like, it's a little bit concerning, but over time, I think, he'll and we're still kind of waiting for those to happen.
Yeah.
Now, granted, again, he doesn't have a good coach. Like I hate the position that the Bears have put Thomas Brown. It's not a fair position for him to be in, but unfortunately, I think we're living in a world where he's not the answer.
Yep.
And maybe he had done some good things with Caleb, but that was in the booth. He might just be an OC, and that's okay. But right now, that's not helping Caleb. And that was kind of I know Naz's fear. He was very vocal about that in terms of promoting Thomas Brown, because if the goal was to make Caleb to develop him for the rest of the season, then he should have stayed OC. It kind of looks like maybe Nas had the right idea. I get why they did it with Thomas Brown. We wanted to see if he had what it took to be a head coach. The rave reviews that he had gotten from the locker room, from Sean McVay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at this point in the season, I am going into the offseason with major concerns for Caleb, whether that's him just being healthy, him just missing throws that he should be making at this point, him still not being on the same page with wide receivers. Like, I think about that sluggo route that Keenan ran on the fade where he just stopped. And now and Caleb was throwing to the back pylon. And it just, again, looked like they were off sync, which is just crazy that it's happening in week 15. Like that just shouldn't be happening. So I do have my concerns about Caleb. I don't want to just crown him and say he's the savior of the franchise, because unfortunately, while he's had the best rookie season of a Bears rookie quarterback, that doesn't mean a whole lot, because it's been a lot of bad quarterback play. I'm still very excited. Like, the arrow is still absolutely up, but it's just going to be about getting this coach right, and possibly even GM hire right, because I don't think that they have the answer at GM.
Yeah, I'm. If I'm not all the way there, it feels like every game that I watch, I'm inching closer to agreeing with you, with your statement you just made about Ryan Poles. I don't share the same exact concerns with Caleb. I think it's frustrating to watch now, but the times where it's not O-line and it's just him, that's easy. I don't want to say easy. That's coachable. It's footwork. You texted it numerous times today of like, man, the feet were a little all over the place. And that's him still getting used to NFL pressure, him having a bad O-line. And again, there's even times where it's not. He has a clean pocket and it still happens. That to me is just rookie shit. So that didn't scare me at all. There was, I don't know what Twitter account it was. This was some weeks ago where they were showing like some, elite quarterbacks now who had some pretty, what looked like troubling deep ball statistics. Joe Burrow hit like on 19% of his deep throws. I forgot who the other ones were on that. Like Josh Allen, his deep throw percentage was really bad. Like, I'm not all that concerned. That to me is a whole, like, my biggest concern isn't of him. It's the whole operation because of what you just talked about. People still not being on the same page. Going back to Troy Aikman, the fact that he didn't realize that that wasn't Caleb being super inaccurate on that throw to Keenan. He thought he was going to keep slanting, and he stopped behind a defender instead of being in open space. Again, I'm not excusing Caleb. I'm pointing out times where I don't know who was right and who was wrong, but there's no fucking excuse to not be on the same page in week 15. It makes zero sense to me. You can it happened that way with Waldron. It's still happening that way with Brown. Now it was less that way when Brown was in the booth and he was the OC. But that's honestly my last thought, Jack. I'm glad you brought it up because Nas was at the forefront of the take, and I didn't necessarily disagree with them. In the moment, I just didn't give a fuck because I wanted Eberflus gone. I like it by any means necessary. Nas himself could have been the head coach of the team if it meant Eberflus was gone. I didn't care. But he was right. He hit the nail on the head. If it was really about developing Caleb, it would have been Richard Hightower at head coach, and you leave Brown in the booth and you continue to let him work, what he was working with Caleb in those 2 games that he was the OC. That being said, just like you said, I still understand. I don't think you're looking at Richard Hightower as your potential head coach. That would have been in the immediate to continue on with Caleb and progressing him. But then you leave the season without ever giving Thomas Brown a shot because I don't think you're hiring him if you don't give him a 5-game sample size. You're probably going to interview him just to do it, maybe even just to fulfill the Rooney Rule. But like, if he doesn't get this chance, I don't think he has a chance at all at being the head coach next season.
Well, and it looks like that was probably the right decision. Frank, can I give you a depressing stat or depressing thought?
Take us out with a depressing stat. Why don't you? After we just subjected ourselves to that.
So obviously we know that the Bears have lost 8 in a row, right?
Yes.
It's very clear they're 4-10. Yes. 8 in a row.
Yep.
That's good for the 9th overall pick in this upcoming draft.
That's crazy. There really is. We were sort of talking about this, and honestly, like for the listeners, this is probably going to be our weekly episode. I don't think we'll record anything else. Potentially some short form stuff. I can't talk about this team
anymore.
There's nothing else. I think we just regroup after another loss next week and talk about the grand takeaways of where we're at with different players or whatever. But the middle class of the NFL this year just kind of doesn't exist. It's either the really good teams that still have their issues, or like the really bad teams. And like we're kind of a middle class team with 4 wins, unfortunately. That's kind of crazy to think about.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got what's even crazier right now is Detroit and Minnesota are tied 12-2 for first place, and you obviously have the Packers in 3rd place at 10-4.
It pisses me off because I have a really close friend who's a Vikings fan, and literally going into this year, he's like, I don't know what the hell is going to happen. Like it's a retooling year. We flipped over, but I know. But and the thing is that's how much coaching matters. Forget names. Forget whether you like Justin better or you wanted Caleb or think Caleb should be playing better. I don't think you can objectively look at both rosters off, at least offensively, except for the trenches, and say like they're that much better. That Minnesota is that much better than us on paper, talent wise. Where they are that much better is their head coach and their coordinators. It's like miles better. It's frustrating to see teams with lesser talent, in my opinion, of course, perform that much better than the Chicago Bears. And again, this is seriously my last point. And I tweeted this too on the pod. I'm not even like worried about wins. I'm not worried about wins. I just want to be watchable. They have yet to meet the bar consistently in my lifetime to be watchable. Because even 2018, Jack, that second half of the year, we thought like, they're getting used to Nagy. He'll adjust to the adjustments, and he never did. He never fucking did. And that offense has been what the Chiefs are dealing with for the last 2 years for the rest of his tenure here. And it's the same thing. Like this team is just not watchable, man.
It's been our bar for quite some time, Frank.
I know. And we're going to go. And the funny thing is we're going in the next year with that bar. Yeah. Even if we only win 6 games, but the team is fun to watch. Like I'm trying to think of like who was a bad, fun team. I guess like the Lions before they started winning. The offense was still putting up points and they were doing their thing. I'm thinking like year 1. I don't know if they had a winning record with year 2 under Campbell, but like that was a fun team, a fun, vibrant coach, getting young pieces together. I mean, it felt like 2014, 2015 Cubs. That's sort of, they had that vibe to them where it's like, man, if they're another piece or 2 away from really doing the thing. It didn't. Yeah, I doubt their fan base cared that they were losing some of those games.
I'm curious. I want to look. and maybe this is something we can do as the season winds down a little bit more. But I do want to start looking a little bit more at the GM candidates, because obviously we've been talking a lot about the head coaching candidates as well. Because I do think I'm kind of at the point with Ryan Poles where it's just like I just can't. It's so hard for me to believe, Frank, that just hiring a new head coach is going to is going to solve all of the problems that this team faces, whether it's some of the attitude that we've seen from a lot of guys like Tyreek Stevenson, and DJ Moore, a lot of those guys that we've talked about so much this year. It's like who we need a change. I just can't see how just a head Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel come in and this thing is just completely different. It's so hard for me to envision that. And that's if they even get it right.
I
And
know.
it's such a big offseason. There's so many opportunities to do something obvious, like signing Trey Smith, the guard from the Kansas City Chiefs, or signing Drew Alford, the center for the Falcons. Like there's obvious upgrades available to you. But do you really trust Ryan Poles at this point to do what needs to be done to make this team competitive? Because guess what, Frank? The rest of your division are three teams that are all in the playoffs this year.
Yep.
Like that's what you're competing with. And
Yep.
and fair or not, it's what you're competing with. You need to act like the Chicago Bears, figure it out, stop being an embarrassment for your fan. Like how many more national games, Frank, are we going to have to go to where this team just gets clowned? Like
Yeah.
we had with Troy Aikman saying they need to prove that they still belong in the NFL. Like the Bears fans don't deserve that, man, at all.
I know. Listen, I mean, it's I'm not going to pretend to know what I would be looking for in a potential GM. Certainly, I'm open for the discussion, like and learning about that process. But the to tag on what we'll probably do for the rest of the year is like quite literally go down the list of acquisitions and players that are on this roster. And I don't know how we would phrase it, just more of like if they were on a 1-year deal, would you be bringing them back next year? There's just not very many blue chips. And then to your point, the blue chip talents that we have, like DJ Moore, all of a sudden he signs a contract and does not want to be here anymore.
Which
It's
again
strange.
is
And then Cole Kmet just does not exist. He is not a part of this team anymore.
And it's very frustrating because, one of the things that we gave Matt Eberflus a lot of credit for when, we were talking about pros and cons of him being retained was like, oh, he built this great culture and he's, built a good locker room, et cetera, et cetera. Ryan Poles, he obviously cares about culture. It's why he didn't draft Jalen Carter. He wants the right guys in his locker room. And it feels like the guys that he's extended and given money to have just unfortunately not lived up to their end of the deal, like DJ Moore. And I you could probably argue Jalen Johnson has, but you think of Cole Kmet. Obviously, I don't think we would argue that he has. DJ Moore hasn't had the best season.
But it's less about DJ Moore's stats, and it's more about his attitude.
Yeah,
he's just been
his
being
leadership.
a fucking weirdo. Yeah.
And like Montez Sweat, like he's not had the season that I think any of us thought he would have at this point. Whether, obviously a lot of factors play into that, but when you get paid to be, as Nas said, one of the top players in the NFL, you got to play like it. And it's just, it hasn't come through. And this team is just in bad sorts right now. And it's a tough place to be in when you're 4-10 and have the 9th overall pick. Like that's, it's a rough place to be. And
it is.
Now, granted, optimism, if we want to leave this podcast with that, it's Caleb didn't play great this game. Obviously, no one's going to make that argument. But I got a lot of respect that he just kept fighting. He was the one player I think that just kept really fighting, especially on offense. And DeAndre Swift, he had a rough game, but in the second half he played a lot better. And I just have to hope that with the upgraded offensive line, if it doesn't happen, Frank, like now, it's never going to happen. It's just a very scary offseason for me.
No, it is. It's one of the most important off seasons of our lifetime, or at least of us paying attention to the Bears. I mean, it feels like you finally have your quarterback, and you have to build around it. Which I know we're not talking about this today, but speaking of my bar being watchable, I think I'm all in on Ben Johnson. I don't give a fuck about the defense. I don't care if they give up 40 points a game. I just want this offense to hum.
Yeah,
he can be a glorified offensive coordinator. I don't give a fuck. I don't care if he can lead anybody. Just get my quarterback right. That's all I want in my life.
Yeah, I think after this game, because we saw the shots of Ryan Poles and we saw George McCaskey looking on as well. To me, there's no way that Ben Johnson isn't the pick at this point. It's.
I mean, listen,
I would be absolutely shocked.
It also it's a money thing, and we know how this family operates when it comes to that. They don't pay coaches; they want to cheap out on them, unfortunately. And the only time it worked for us was Lovey.
Let's hope Let's hope Kevin Warren, he's able to convince him that if they want to make more money, they need to be a watchable franchise.
Hopefully, I mean, you would think so. But yeah, I mean, I'm totally in on discussing potential GM candidates because I'm operating.
You know what? Just let Ben Johnson pick his GM. I don't care who it is.
I'm in for it. And honestly, if he says I'm good with polls, I guess fuck it. I'm good with polls too. Like it's I would live in his world at that point.
I'm sure there's a lieutenant under Brad Holmes or whoever it is in Detroit.
Right.
That can come with Ben Johnson. I'm sure he can find a guy.
Yeah. No, for sure. And it's one thing, whoever the next coach is, because it's very clear that this team has a lot more holes than I think we thought. Outside of it, we knew the trenches were going to be subpar at best. Like it was never a thing. But I feel I don't want to give whoever the next coach is too much credit for guys playing hard on them early. Like, because we did that with Eberflus, and now I'm thinking back, I'm like, yeah, no shit, because these guys wouldn't be in the NFL if they weren't on this terrible Bears roster. They're playing their fucking hearts out. They would have played their hearts out for me that way, or you that way. Like, there's different things. Again, we're getting older and more mature in our takes and our ability to, like, because we've gone through all this trauma being Bears fans. Like, I have a good grasp earlier as to what I'm looking for and, like, signs that I think we have our guy. That was the case with quarterback. That was the case, I think, now with head coach, probably GM as well, after we've seen the way that going from Angelo to I don't remember Tressman's GM Emery to Poles and now, or to Pace and now Poles. Like, we've seen a ton of different philosophies. Granted, none of them really worked except for Angelo. He was good at drafting for the defense, but yeah, I'm in a spot now that I think at the very least we're not blindly like, yeah, let's just see how it works. Like, I think very early on we will know, or at least have takes and like be able to explain why we think something.
I would give anything to be a casual observer again, Frank.
I'm right there with you. Listen, when we started this podcast, we were supposed to be good. It was like around the 2018 season. It was
2018.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Mitch was supposed to be on his third Super Bowl by now.
And things were good. And then, oh God, Frank, I just want to get to a point where we just stop talking about the past.
Yeah.
And just talk about the present, like in a positive way. Like people are out here talking about, oh, maybe Mitch wasn't that bad. It's like, dude,
let's cut it out.
Stop. I don't want to talk about Matt Nagy if he was the best head coach we've had in the last 10 years. I don't want to talk. Like, can we just get it right? Can we just hire good, smart people who know how to do their jobs and find football play? Like, oh my God, I'm so tired of having like the nice locker room and Ryan Poles, his obsession with drafting people, signing people who either are from Illinois or who are Bears fans in the past. Yeah. Like, cut it out. Find good players.
Yeah. Well, it's listening to Hogan Johns, I forgot who was on there. He always puts up funny stats on Twitter, but he said something that I totally agree with. Do something you're uncomfortable with. If you're too comfortable with a candidate or even like a draft pick, and I'm not saying like, super red flags, but like you have to be a little bit uncomfortable. Like that's what made you miss out on Jim Harbaugh. You wanted this nice little boys club where everyone gets along and there's not going to be any friction up top. No, there needs to be that.
Nobody's swearing.
Oh God, that whole Hard Knocks thing. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Well, no,
looking
I
back
didn't
at
know.
that Hard
Honestly,
Knock
I did
stuff.
not know that was a thing until either you or Nas brought that up in like week 2. Like one of y'all, and I was like, wait, really? I didn't pay attention to it live. It did not strike me either way. But the fact that that actually existed is just so telling. It's so telling. Dude, we're not a
Yeah.
fucking an evangelical organization that's like we're trying to step right in the name of the Lord. You're build a fucking football team, dude. And if you got to have a convicted felon, so fucking be it. MAGA 2024.
Yeah, I think I think that's just why a lot of Bears fans, myself somewhat included, just don't believe that there's a world where we get it right, because George is still in charge of the team, and it's just been a disaster ever since he took over. It's been embarrassing, and there apparently just is no bottom. Now, again,
Yeah.
Caleb is probably the second most talented quarterback they've had currently. We'll see if he can elevate past Jay Cutler. I saw a stat on Monday Night Football tonight that Bears have had one Pro Bowl quarterback in the last 35 years, and that
Mitchell,
was
baby.
obviously Mitch, your boy. It's depressing, man. It's so hard to watch these games, and where you're just looking for a little bit of fun, and it's kind of what this podcast specifically has only really been asking for, is just, again, just let us have some fun, man. Like, stop being so miserable to watch, please. Yeah. Like, you think the Lions fans cared that they lost the game after dropping, what was it, like 45 points?
Yeah.
42 points. They lost. Like,
yeah.
Give me that.
That's what I mean. Like, losing still comes with frustrations, but being able to watch a franchise, that game was fun, just objectively, just absolutely objectively. Like, I remember having this conversation with I had a friend who was a Cleveland Indians fan when the Cubs beat them in the World Series. I don't know the Guardians now, but they were the Indians then. And like, I told him, like, listen, I know this isn't gonna do anything for you, and I'm not just saying this because the Cubs won. That was the greatest series I've ever seen in my life. He's like, dude, I agree with you. He's like, it sucked, it hurt at the end, but my God, just the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs. He's like, obviously, outside of like losing Game 7, I wouldn't change anything else. That was insane to watch. And like, that's just what I want. If it means like losing insane games all the time and like heartbreakers and stuff, but just be watchable, that's it. And then we can get there. Once we're there, once we're watchable for like a year, then maybe the expectations can rise. It's mind-boggling to me that we still have not become a watchable football team.
It's only one man at the time. Like, it's just funny to think about, because like all of the problems that Caleb is facing are problems that Jay faced, that Mitch faced, that Justin faced.
This is like almost malpractice. I know it was bad for other guys. This is crazy.
It is. I meant specifically like how he was playing. Like the amount of people who are just like, throw the ball. It's like, how many times did we see Mitch become gun shy? Justin become gun shy. Obviously Jay was a little bit different, but he was a proven veteran when he got here, and had been through a lot before George took over. But it's just like, we just play scared. And this first half, like, the fact that Thomas Brown as head coach, like, the first halves have been worse since he took over as OC from Shane Waldron is just crazy to me.
I know.
It's unacceptable. Like, everything that's happened this season is beyond unacceptable. And that's why I think it's just, like, kind of go full circle a little bit. It's why I'd be okay with moving on from Ryan Poles. He's done some good things. There's no doubt about that. But every GM
I'm questioning that,
things.
though. When we have that episode, whenever that is, I don't know how many good things I can name. It may be on one hand.
Well, we're gonna have to tease that a little bit, but you get my point. You know, like every GM does some good things, but has he done any great things? He's done nothing that's really translated on the football field that have translated to wins. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what this business is all about. It's about getting wins, being competitive, playing meaningful games in December and January, and it's just not happening. And so if his fatal mistake was doubling down on Matt Eberflus when we all saw it coming, we talk about it a bunch. That Patriots game, for me, like, we all knew, except for Ryan Poles, and he made the decision to stick by his guy, and ultimately I think it should cost him his job. Yeah,
I agree because, again, it's even if it was just getting the coach wrong, you're watching these games, man. And again, putting the onus on the players, this is also on them. And nothing about this roster is sticking out at all. Nothing about. I know there's like a lack of coaching and execution and blah blah blah, but just talent wise, who jumps off the screen? Rome has his flashes, but he's a rookie. I'm not expecting him to come in and fucking
dropped another touchdown pass.
Yeah, he did. He also dropped another touchdown pass. But you get what I'm saying? Like I excuse rookies for things like that much more. You have a longer leash with that. But who else on this team? The big signings have been awful. Tremaine Edmonds has been awful.
Yeah.
Nate Davis just finally got caught a couple weeks ago. Like you're watching
Chase Claypool.
Chase Claypool had one touchdown catch in his Bears tenure. Like it's and even from the rookies, we're seeing Amagaji be awful. Second year guys.
Shelton.
Colton Shelton be bad. Where Tyreek Stevenson, who ended last year really good, the last 6 games really good. He's regressed immensely. Not only just under Eberflus, who still had the defense playing well, now under a whole different DC. Like nothing is coming up Ryan Poles right now, unfortunately for him.
And unfortunately, that's just kind of Bears. But this has been the House of Halas podcast. We do genuinely appreciate you sticking with us through that game because that was a rough one. Let us know your rage takes. Is Caleb the worst quarterback you've ever seen? We've heard that quite a number of times. Feel free to tell us what frustrated you most about this game. But we'll be back next week to talk a little Bears, Lions. It's that one could be rough. That one could be a little bit rough. The last time, obviously, we saw how that ended the Matt Eberflus experience. So we'll see what the Lions do to the Bears this time. But I'm Jack. That's Frank. Hopefully Nas will join us next time. But we appreciate you listening, Frankie. Let's see how this goes.
Yep. Later, Jackie. Later, everybody.